Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar, all about visas and residency in France. My name is Christopher Nye. It's great to have you all with us today, whether you're with us live or catching up on demand. We're delighted to be able to help you to fulfill that dream of buying a home and moving to France. Today's session will be a maximum of 45 minutes. And for those of you listening in live, there's plenty of opportunity to put your questions to Tracy from Leonetti Business Services. If you do wish to ask anything, please type your query into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. And also, thank you to those of you who sent in your questions prior. We really appreciate it, and we'll answer as many as we can. Now, if you need a reminder of anything discussed today or want to share this with family or friends, a replay will be available on the Your Overseas Home website to watch at your leisure. And just to put in an early plug as well for our big virtual show on the 26th of March, where we will be doing all this again. But for this evening, I'm delighted to be joined by Tracy from Leonetti Business Services. Tracy was born and raised in Hull, in England. She resisted the urge to travel and began her professional career in the civil service. However, it soon became apparent that life had more to offer, and after traveling to lots of countries, Tracy settled in France in the beautiful and romantic Côte d'Azur, where she studied for a business degree at the CERAM, have I pronounced that correctly, Business School. So enough from me. Tracy from Leonetti Business Services will be doing a little presentation, and then we'll have a lovely long Q&A to try and get all your questions answered. So I will pass over to Tracy.
Excellent. Thanks a lot, Chris. And thanks a lot, everybody, for coming on this evening. And I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. Looking forward to answering lots of your questions about your move to France. So just a few slides to kick the ball off tonight and to help people with the transition. I wanted to say a few words about a little bit about who I am, where I come from, and more importantly, why I do what I do. And there's nothing more important really when you move to a new country is really getting through those paperwork processes. And really, when I came to France at over 30 years, and actually it's 30 years this year that I've been living in France, I struggled through the different processes. And I found it really, really difficult, even with my basic French. And I realized it shouldn't be that difficult. And I really wish somebody had been there to help me. And that is where the idea for LBS came from originally. And what I think is very important to point out to anybody watching tonight or watching on the replay is we have many processes that we will encounter when moving to a new country, be that France or any other country. And we focus often on the house hunting because that is the exciting and the motivation side of looking for your dream home. But that itself can be a challenge, of course, you know, knowing where you want to live, what type of property you want. Are you going to rent or buy first? There's all those questions about the buying process. And then, of course, the immigration side of things, which has always been a big part of my life because I came to France in 30 years, like I said. And when I came to France, the UK was not part of the EU 30 years ago. So the immigration process I started way back when. And for now, the British people, we've come full circle. So they're now experiencing the same things again that I experienced 30 years ago, and that the Americans and the Australians have always been experiencing. And, you know, healthcare as well and carte vitale, those are kind of the three main processes. But as you can see on this slide, there are lots of processes that you may or may not encounter depending on what your situation is. So I wanted to point that out to you tonight. Obviously, we'll be looking mainly at immigration, but I have a slide on healthcare as well, just to go through that with you a little bit. What I find is that a lot of people have questions, much like tonight. I'm going to try and answer as many questions as we can, simply to help that smooth transition. And my clients actually, although they want the answers, what they really want is the job done. And, you know, That is what we created the Serenity Club about. It was really to ensure that our clients understood where we were going with them, but also to get those right answers. There's lots of information out there on the forums. Of course, you can find that information out there, but is it the right answer and is it the right one to yours? That is what's important for my clients. So sometimes you just need some answers, and let's get some answers for you tonight. There is something that is really important when you first move into France, and I call it this my paperwork footprints. And I don't think you can emphasize enough the paperwork footprints. It's part of the planning process. And when I have a consultation one-on-one with my relocation clients, this will be the first slide that I will put up there. So I'm sharing that with you tonight, because all of these documents, or a part of these documents, depending on your situation, if you have children, if you're retired, or if you're working, if you're driving a car, with your health situation, will be needed throughout the various different processes that you may encounter. So of course, I'm not going to read that out. It's up on the slide. You can watch it on the replay and see which documents that you might need. So paperwork footprints, make sure you prepare your documents and have access to them when you move into France. Immigration, again, the next big subject that most of my clients reach out to me about, but then we find that not just immigration problems, we have all the other problems behind it as well. So as an overview on the immigration, the first tip I would say to anybody moving to France on the immigration side of things is to really think what your long-term objectives are. Where are you going with your move to France? Because some people may want to come in as a visitor simply because it's an easier visa to go through. But if the long-term plans are to have citizenship and become a French citizen, then it may not be the option to go for. Okay, so there are different types of visas. Visitor's visa being the most popular, which we'll have a look in a minute. But there are also working visas like the liberal visa, which is a very popular visa and not as complicated as some business visas. For people who have consultancy businesses, or are independent freelance workers, then a liberal visa is not the most complicated if you can prove the financial stability of the business idea. Student visas, that in fact is what I came on a student visa 30 years ago. I came as a student and then found a job, and that is how my life in France started. I turned up with 3 bags and actually went to French language school, and that was my way in. And then, of course, you have to think about the renewals of the visas, which can be a problem if you don't do it in enough time, especially since COVID, where there's a huge backlog at most of the prefectures. So do think about your immigration situation as in a long-term plan. Where are you going with that? Don't necessarily think about it the short, quickest way, because you want to be thinking about the long-term project. And the biggest questions I get is obviously the 9180 rule is a really confusing rule, and it makes me laugh because I say I'm pretty old-fashioned with this one, being 30 years. Before, the 9180 was easier because you'd go into the Schengen area, and if you popped out for a few days, it reset you 90 days. It's different now. So first of all, the most important thing to understand is the Schengen area. Of course, there are 26 countries in the Schengen area. The UK has never been part of the Schengen, and is often used by non-Europeans to pop out of the Schengen area into the UK. And it's really important to know that once you're in that Schengen area, once you go into the Schengen area, your passport will be stamped. And the time that you're in the Schengen area, your passport won't be stamped. So if you go from France to Italy or Spain, your passport's not going to get stamped because you're in the Schengen area. It will get stamped when you come out of the Schengen area again, okay? And whilst you're in that Schengen area, you can only spend 90 in every 180 days. And there are calculators out there, which I find extremely complicated, and most people do. But maybe that's what, if you like technology, then go and find the calculator online. My old-fashioned way of looking at it is I have a big calendar with my clients, and we just plot. So we put down the date they arrive and the date they leave, and that may be a 10-day window to start with. And you look at you just go back 180 days on that calendar. You know those big calendars that you can get, they're very big like this. You just count back 180 days and you put a line there. And then, of course, each time you come back, that 180 days, some of that will roll off the end. That's why it's called a rolling window. Each time it will move across, some of that time will roll off the end. And so long as you don't spend more than 90 days in that 180 time frame, then you're okay. People say to me, what's the problem if I overstay? It's a big question. And the reason that you don't want to overstay in the Schengen area is if you wanted to get a visa. If you get red flagged because you've overstayed your welcome, if you're going for a visa of any kind, that can be refused because you've outstayed your welcome. It's a risk to take. Some people think you stay 3 or 4 days extra, it's not going to be a big difference. Certainly for Americans and Australians and New Zealand people, you know, you have to be careful on that. For the British, it's all new. But if you're thinking of getting a business visa or a long stay visa, try and avoid overstaying in the Schengen area. And when you travel around the Schengen area, normally it can go anywhere in that area. It's not make a difference. Your 90 days is in that area. It's not just necessarily in France, okay? And we have questions, obviously, later on we can look at that. But I wanted to give an overview on that already because I know that question will come up. It always does. And the visitor's long stay visa is the one that most people go for. And my clients laugh at me because I say it's not rocket science. In fact, we were just talking about this, wasn't we, Chris? It's not rocket science getting a visa of this type. However, it's like I was saying, the information is out there, it is available. However, if you get it wrong, it goes very, very wrong. You tick the wrong box, you don't get the right visa. And the big mistake with long stay visas is to get the visa that's not renewable in France. So that means you'd have to go back to the UK or whatever country, America, Australia, and renew in the country of origin. For the UK, for the British, it's not a big deal because it's just across, you know, across the way. But for Australians and Americans, it can be a huge deal, especially in COVID times. So just be careful that you don't tick the wrong box for a long stay visitor's visa. I've laid out the general process here just so you can look at that and read through it later at your own leisure. And the last slide that I have here is really, I want to touch on healthcare. There's like 3 key processes on the possible, you know, 13, 14 different processes that you can meet when you come to France. And healthcare is a key one. A, because you need to have healthcare to come into France on a visa. But to be also, once you're in France, you have to have healthcare because it's illegal to live in a country as a resident without healthcare. That is important for you to understand. Secondly, it's people ask me, you know, how can I get into the French healthcare system? Well, I've listed the ways here. If you are coming into France and you are a salaried person, you would be in the French healthcare system because you're paying into the social system. And emphasize here, French healthcare system is not free. It's a contributory system where everybody pays into it in some way or form, unless you're retired and you've paid all your contributions, in which case they consider you've paid your dues already. So if you're salaried, you would be receiving a salary slip where you'll be having your contributions will be deducted at source, and therefore you have access to the French healthcare system. If you're a business owner, you will pay your social contributions to the URSSAF, and therefore you have access to the healthcare system via your contributions to the URSSAF. If you are retired and of retirement age, and receiving a retirement pension, you can have access to the French healthcare system using an S1 that you request in the country of origin. And that is a big one for people moving across on long stay visitors visas who are retired and of retirement age. I emphasize of retirement age because, of course, if you're not and you're just an early retiree, then that wouldn't apply. Hence, category number 4, resident and early retirees. Anybody who doesn't fall into the other conditions, of course, would come into France and apply for healthcare as a resident of longer than 3 months and an early retiree, in which case the paperwork that you provide is much different to that of a retired person, okay? It's a little bit more intrusive and a little bit longer. And of course, we have workers abroad using S1 as well. So that is a bit more complicated situation. Where you can use the S1 if you're coming to work from abroad, but for visa purposes, that's more complicated. The last thing to say on the healthcare, and I'm happy to answer a question on this later on if any come up, is what you need to concentrate on, and this is part of a consultation when I do it normally, we spend an hour and a half together, is concentrate on getting your social security number. Don't concentrate on getting a carte vitale. Because at the moment, I can tell you from a practical perspective, there is over a year's wait list to get your carte vitales due to COVID. So the most important thing when trying to get into the French healthcare system is to get your social security number so your reimbursements are in place. Okay. So that's all I will say on the healthcare for the moment, because I'm conscious that we don't have a huge amount of time tonight. But if there are any questions, then of course pop them into the chat and Chris will let me know later. And that is it. Thank you. Over to you, Chris.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. Well, firstly, just to say we're going to cover loads of information, so do realize that you can just go back and watch the video again and get it all and note it all down. So a question has occurred to me. So the whole 1900 days thing, it's all based on that little stamp in your passport. It all seems a bit low tech, or is there some register being kept somewhere? Suppose I lose my passport, or suppose I'm going to New Haven at 2 in the morning and there's no one around.
Well, I mean, you get stamped, but there's also the scanning process. Don't forget, when you go through passport control, they scan your passport.
Right. So it's all kept. So you can't.
Yes, it's not quite as simple as that. Yes.
Okay. So we've had a few questions in. So one from Mandy. I have a question. Can you tell me whether substantial savings around 300,000 euros would be adequate for proof of self-sufficiency for residency, or whether you must have a regular monthly income to gain residency?
Sufficient savings of 300,000 would be sufficient, of course. They do like to have revenue simply because sufficient savings can be spent on a house or a boat, or, you know, if you have an extravagant lifestyle, 300,000 euros won't go a long way on the Côte d'Azur. No, I'm joking. But what I'm saying here is, of course, revenue is important. They like that, but if you've got 300,000 euros in the bank account and you can prove it, then that would be sufficient to get you into France, no problem.
Okay. And one from Fiona. She's simply asked, what is an S1?
An S1 is like a portability document. Basically, the most important use of the S1, if you are a retired person in the UK or another European country, there is an agreement between countries to transfer their healthcare rights. This basically means you would have the same rights as a resident in France to healthcare, but it would be the UK or whichever country you come from that pays their healthcare. So it's transparent for you from a paperwork perspective. Once you're in France, you get the same rights, the same carte vitale, the same social security number. It's just that between the French and the UK, it's the UK that pay. And the S1 is a document that is given to retirees because, of course, they're receiving a retirement pension and therefore they've already paid their dues. So the S1 is, you apply to that in the UK and you bring it to France and then you apply using the S1.
Okay. Okay, a question from Sarah. If you already have a property in France, is it better to apply for a long-term visa from France or apply before leaving the UK?
You absolutely have to apply before leaving the UK. There is no choice on that. Any visa has to be applied from the country of origin.
Right. So if you live in France, you're going to come back here to apply to go and live in France.
Well, if she's British,
yeah,
she can only be living in France for 90 days out every 180. Yeah. So she can pop in and pop out, and that's fine. But if she wants to stay longer than 90 days, then she has to apply for the appropriate visa, and that has to be done. It can be done in France online, but her visa appointment will be in the UK, and she'll have to stay in the UK until the visa goes into a passport, and then she. Is that clear or not clear?
I think that's clear. Yes. Okay. So just take me through the application process for the long-term visa. How long will it take? So, yeah.
So the long-term visitors visa, well, any visa really, you need to count 3 months. Between 2 and 3 months, and you can't apply before 3 months because it's too long. So I would suggest between, when you want to be in France. So when you want to be in France for a certain day, take 3 months back and start applying. Okay. And you make the application online, and then you have to make an appointment. And the complication is knowing when the appointments will be available sometimes. So it's best to get in early, get your appointment in. Even if it's a month from now, that's fine. And then once the appointment's in, then and you've handed your passport over, it can be as quick as 1 week. We've had visas come through in a week. It can be 3 weeks. And if you're applying in the height of the season, July and August, you probably want to be counting 3 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
So I would suggest starting the process 12 months beforehand.
Okay. Now, a question from Jan, who says, "I'm most concerned about medical cover and how that will work now that we have left the EU." I know you've touched on this. Yeah. So.
Medical cover. So again, it depends on really what the project is. But for example, if you're coming across on a long stay visitors visa, of course, you have to have private healthcare to come across with anyway for the first year. Right. So you'd have to have unless you have an S1. So you'd have to come across with a private healthcare coverage if you was applying for a year visa. And then once your visa is stamped, because it has to get validated by the immigration office in France, once that has happened, you can then apply to the French healthcare via the residency criteria. So if you're not working, you don't have a business, you're not retired, you just come to France, you've got your visa stamped, then you would apply as a resident of 3 months or more, and that's called the PUMA system. You've probably heard of that, or maybe not, but that would be the PUMA system, and is applicable to any resident of France of over 3 months.
Okay. So suppose you've got a pre-existing medical condition. Suppose you're just recovering from cancer, say. Is that going to mean that your premiums are going to be so high that it becomes prohibitive to go and to get that first year of cover?
It is a difficult one, because of course, when you come through on a visa, you need to have that insurance, and the insurance, of course, you get a quotation, but if you have a pre-condition existing condition, of course, the insurance can go up. If you are retired and have a retirement pension, you can get an S1. Although you won't get the S1 before you move to France, you can get a letter from them to say you're entitled to it, and that will stop you having to get private healthcare. So it depends on the situation of the person asking the question. But yes, it can be difficult, because of course, if you have some illnesses that you have to declare on your insurance documents, that can take the premium quite high. But it would only be for the first year, because after that you would be in the French healthcare system, and any pre-existing conditions or any serious healthcare condition is covered at 100% in the French healthcare system.
Okay. Now, we've had two questions, one from Colin and one from Mark, who have both got spouses who have EU passports or expect to have one soon. So what's their status? What would they be moving to France under?
So again, this is one that comes across quite often, and it's a good question. So if you are married to an EU partner, of course, that's going to facilitate the visa process for you. So officially and legally, you could come into France with your EU partner without a visa and apply to the local prefecture as a family member of an EU spouse, if you like. So you don't necessarily have to have a visa. However, generally speaking, when I speak to my clients, I advise them to get a visa, a 6-month visa anyway, simply because there is so much backlog at the prefectures that when you go and try and get your residency card that you're entitled to as an EU member, married to an EU member, it can take, up to 6 months, which means then you're stuck in France, because after 90 days, if you leave and you've overstayed, they might not let you back in again. So there's kind of this catch-22 situation. It's not an obligation to have the visa. You can come in without it because you're traveling with an EU member. However, the process to legalize your situation in France can take quite a lot of time. So my advice would be just pop online, get a 6-month visa, come in with your 6-month visa, and then go to your local prefecture and request a carte de séjour or a residency card for a family member of an EU citizen. Bearing in mind, it's the the financial situation of the EU citizen, which will be looked at during the process, and that EU citizen has to have a very stable financial situation in France for you to get your residency card.
Okay, thank you. Now, we've talked all about visa and residency, but that, of course, when you move to France, that's not the only issue. There's all sorts of other bits and pieces to worry about. What do you find is what do you think is the thing that causes most problem?
Well, it's like I showed on the first slide we had up. There's about, possibly 14 and 15 different processes you can encounter. And I guess one of them that causes the most problem, is the most difficult to go through, is the healthcare system. Definitely is probably the process the most complicated, simply about the time it takes and how important it is to get into that system. So visas are the healthcare is a difficult one. Visas is not necessarily that difficult, but it is very essential, because of course if you get it wrong, then the rest of the situation is complicated. And I do find that we underestimate the difficulty of finding your home as well, because although we think coming into France, the process is different to the UK and to other countries effectively. So it's very important that people understand the legalities of the situation, and the tax as well, how the taxes are different as well, completely different to the UK and to other countries.
Well, I'm just going to interrupt because we have a question from Patricia about inheritance tax. Is it necessary to have a will in both countries? I have a property there with one of my two daughters.
I think if you're a resident of France, it's good to have a will. Absolutely, especially if you're not a French citizen. I think it's a really good idea to have a will. And if you've got an English will, to get that, into front of a French notaire and get that translated into French and signed off in France. There's no obligation to do it, but I would highly recommend it.
Okay. I'm gonna flip through some of these questions. They're quite interesting. So this one is from Graham. He's a 71-year-old UK resident. He's buying a €600,000 house in France. How do I get a visa to retire there? I suppose this is interesting because some countries have golden visas. That's not the case in France, is it?
Well, there's the talents visa, but that's a very high. It's a work visa for somebody who's wanting to move across and invest in France. For this gentleman who's 71, he's obviously coming across to retire and enjoy his freedom and life in France. So he can reach out to me and I can help him with that, or he can go onto the France Visa website and apply for a long stay visitors visa, because eventually that is really all that he would really need. He's not going to be working. He's not going to be, I'm assuming he's not going to be working at 71, and why should he? He's probably already done enough. So come and buy his home, enjoy, but don't forget you've got all your taxes to sort out, driving license, car registrations, logistics for moving across the border. That is very complicated now with the whole customs and things. But from a visa perspective, it's the long stay visitors visa I would recommend for him, and it's not the most complicated. But reach out if you need some support with it.
Okay, lots of people, lots of people that move to France are in their sort of mid-50s, like myself, and they're looking for a change of life, but they're not quite retiring yet. Now, tell me about this. Was it the liberal visa?
Yeah, that is an interesting one. And again, that's why I say at the beginning on the slide about understanding the long-term objectives, because if you are 50, 55, you could be considered an early retiree if you have the financial situation to do that. But most people at that age still want to have some sort of activity. And the liberal visa is one that would allow that, because it's a working visa, but it's more like a freelance. So anybody who has a small to medium-sized business idea can put together a financial and a business plan about that project and request a work visa and through the immigration office, and obviously there's a visa through the consulate, and there's also the immigration office in France that you have to apply to. So there's 2 processes to go through, so it's a bit longer. So you need to count at least 4 months for that process, because you've got to put all the business project together, and then once you get that visa, you come to France, you set your business up, and then you just renew it each year, and the business has to be valuable. So if you have, for example, if you're in the UK and you have already a business that's reasonably healthy, or a consultancy business, then why not do that business from France? Set up a small business entity, put together a big project, and have yourself a work visa, and then you can work in France and work with anybody all over the world, but the business is managed from France. So the liberal visa it's not as easy, of course, as a visitor's visa, but it's probably the next best thing for early retirees of your age, Chris, who want to have an activity but don't want to work too hard either.
Okay. Now we've had one from well we've got there's quite a few international listeners. We've got a Canadian married couple looking to retire in France. They may buy or they may rent at first. They have significant cash flow, and one is a retired teacher with good health coverage. What kind of visa would they need, and how likely would they be to get it?
How old are they, did you say?
Doesn't say.
So they're obviously not going to work by the sounds of it. They've got significant cash.
Yes. Retired teacher, it says. So retirement age.
So again, if they have significant funds behind them, if they're going to buy or rent a property, if they've got somewhere to live, if they've got maybe some investment money coming in, or private retirement coming in, then that would be fine. The process is similar for every country, really, and the most difficult thing for Canadians, of course, is the fact that if you don't want it to be refused if you're buying a property. So it's sometimes easier to rent and then buy once all your visa goes through. So I don't see any issues, so long as you have substantial savings, and ideally you need to have some private funds coming in would be good, like private pensions maybe, or something like that, or you can show some good portfolios as well. That's always a good thing. But yeah, I would imagine the long stay visitors visa would be the best way for them to go. And again, reach out if they need a more detailed examination of the file, because it's difficult with not knowing the whole situation. But that's what I would sounds like with the way to go for them.
Okay, now here's an interesting one from Nick. So we have a dependent adult son with autism. What implications would this have regarding healthcare and presumably residency as well? But he's asked about healthcare.
Well, the healthcare, of course, he would actually be part of the healthcare system, of course, attached to the parents. I guess he's underage. Is he underage? Is he under 16? Or so first of all, he will be attached.
No, he's adult.
He's an adult, so again, he would have healthcare under his own right in France. He would still have to have healthcare to come into France, of course, but then once he's in France, he would be able to apply to the French healthcare system, and then what I would suggest is he would be able to apply to the MDPH, which is the Maison des Handicapés in France, which is basically benefits for helping children in need. So it's basically handicap benefits for children who need extra support. So that's something that he could work on with him to get him the support, not just financially, but also any extra help that he needs on a day-to-day basis, if it's getting insertion into the job market, extra help psychology-wise and things like that. So yes, I mean, it's not because he's autist that he doesn't get the chance to be part of the healthcare system. On the contrary, he would get extra help.
Brilliant. Okay. Right, one from Gerard, although this may well apply to me. Actually, if you have a UK state pension and an Irish passport, is moving to France full-time paperwork free? I imagine not paperwork free.
So he's got a UK. So he's got a UK,
and an Irish passport.
Yeah, that's fine because the Irish passport is European, so he doesn't have to worry about a visa. And he can still get the S1 because he's got the retirement pension coming from the UK. So he can apply for an S1 to avoid having the private healthcare cover, and then come in because he's Irish anyway.
Okay. One from David: is there an upper age limit to French residency?
An upper age limit? No, not that I know. No, I mean, I have clients coming over who are, in their late 70s who have decided to live their last retirement years here. I've even got 85-year-olds coming over. So the age, there's no age. Of course, it's more of a health side of things that, because when you do remember that when you come into France, your visa gets stamped, you do have a health visit in the immigration office. So you have a chest x-ray, and then your visa gets stamped. So that is important to know. So if you're coming in, you're seriously ill, that will be picked up.
What other things might limit your chance of getting a visa? Criminal record, I imagine.
Oh, I mean, the one thing that will stop you getting a visa is a criminal record. The two main reasons really is criminal record, not sufficient funds.
Right.
And healthcare. Files at the visa centre can get refused because the healthcare doesn't cover them from €0. So, and sometimes they don't understand the healthcare policy. So with some files we dealt just recently, the healthcare, because the healthcare policy might be called travel, but it meets all the requirements. They see the word travel, they think, it's a travel policy. It's not, it's a healthcare policy. So you have to be careful which healthcare policy you use before going for a visa, because if it's not the right one, it'll get refused. And if you paid a few grand for it, that's a bit of a shame.
Yes. So thinking about the criminal thing, I mean, is it like a custodial sentence? I mean, I was just thinking about our Prime Minister answering questions and possibly facing a fixed penalty fine for breaching COVID regulations. Is that the kind of thing that could see you lose your right to move to France?
I mean, what level of criminality? Quite frankly, I'm not quite sure. I've never had any files refused. So far,
good.
We have 100% success rate. So I've never had any files refused. And that's why I always have a consultation with my clients beforehand anyway, because for me, I have to know the whole situation just so that we can prepare a file just in case. But I would imagine, it's not because you paid late your fines or you've had a driving ticket. That's the problem. It's more very high serious crimes, when you've got a record with the police that's, still on record, then you should worry about it. But, it's not because you've got a few speeding fines that you haven't paid that you have to worry about.
Okay. Now, one from Timothy. I intend to remain a UK citizen and not become a French resident. Can I buy a French car?
That will be very difficult because, you can buy a French car and import it into the UK, but buying a car in France as a non-French resident would be complicated because you have to be able to register it, and you would not be able to register it to a secondary resident. It'd be very difficult to do that. Most garages, they want to know where you live in, and if you've got a bank account and what your salary situation is. Even cash buyers can have difficulty buying a car if they're not a resident of France. You can buy a French car and import it into the UK. So you buy it through a concessionaire and have it imported, but to come across to France to buy a car and drive back with it, that would be difficult.
Okay, I'm thinking perhaps he's intending to stay in France with it, but
if he's intending to stay in France with it, then again, he would still have problems as a secondary resident. Work. Prove he's got an address in France. He'd have to. Oh, am I breaking up? Sorry.
Well,
it must be wine o'clock.
well, we're nearly finished anyway. We're just on the last couple of questions. Well, okay. So Jan has asked, what is your firm charge for handling all the paperwork?
Well, it depends what all the paperwork you want looking after, because we have the prestige pack and the living pack. So basically we do ad hoc services. So for example, some people come to us because they want the visa process looked after, but for our relocation customers, that may where we look after from A to Z. So we help them to get, with the logistics at the customs, and we work with the logistics, the visas, the canvassing, the healthcare, the driving license, the car registration, and all of that. Then it's a prestige pack, and for that we would do a quotation on. So yeah, reach out to me, and we would always have a consultation first, to look at the situation and find out what the long-term objectives are, answer all the key questions, and then we would give you the prestige pack quotation based on all of the paperwork.
Okay.
And that's what we do. We have different levels, but mainly when it's the relocation, we take care from A to Z for the first year.
Okay. We've got a question about what retirement age counts for, I guess, various rights and benefits when moving to France. What sort of retirement age do they count?
Well, it's more for the UK. If it's for a UK person moving to France, it means that they have to be in receipt of a retirement pension, because you could be, I don't know, 85 and moving to France, but if you're not receiving a retirement pension, that means you're not receiving it because you haven't paid into the contribution system enough. Therefore, you wouldn't get an S1. Okay, that doesn't stop a person getting into the healthcare system in France, because they would go through it via the residency criteria. However, the age for France for retirement for French is from the age of 63 to 67 if all the contributions have been paid.
Okay.
So it depends on who's up to speed on the contributions.
Okay. One from Ruth, just to finish off with. Hi Tracy, I have an Irish passport, but my partner just has a UK one. Would you recommend we rush into marriage or start with a long stay visa for him? I think we've already answered. I enjoyed the question. What would be the advantage of a civil partnership?
Well, a civil partnership, that's, getting a pax or something like that is a good idea, because the same rules apply. You can also get a certificate of concubinage, so you can prove that you've been living together as common law husband and wife for more times than, if you can prove that you're living together as husband and wife as common law for the past few years, and get the notary or the lawyer to sign on that, then of course that would be accepted. Or get a pax or something, because that means then you're a partner with an EU citizen, and of course the process is a lot easier.
Okay. I wouldn't rush into marriage. I would get married like in Madame Bovary, with their lovely wedding under the trees. Don't rush into it. Do it nice and romantically, like in France.
Exactly.
Okay. Well, look, we've got dozens of questions still to answer, but we run out of time. Not to worry. We will do all this again soon, I've no doubt, and at our Your Overseas Home live virtual event, which is on the 26th of March. So it's all online again, so you can just do it from the comfort of your own home. But it's a really big event with lots and lots of estate agents and properties and experts like Tracy. So do register for Your Overseas Home virtual event. And thank you once again for Tracy. Do contact her with all your questions, or even better, to sign up for her services to move to France. And thank you very much, Tracy, and thank you for attending.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Cheers. Bye bye.
Bye bye.